9 days. That's how long the point was quiet, and I'm not proud of how much of that quiet I enjoyed. I ate standing up at the counter, left my boots wherever they landed, watched hockey highlights at a volume Colleen would have called inconsiderate. I told myself I missed her. I mostly missed the idea of her being back, so the house would smell like her shampoo again, and the fridge would have something in it besides pickles and old cheddar. That's the part I keep coming back to. I was a happy man that week. A dumb, happy man on a granite point above the water, thinking the worst thing in my life was a leaking Eva Stroh. I picked her up at Pearson on a Thursday night, Terminal 3, arrivals, standing there in my good jacket with my hands in my pockets because I never know what to do with my hands in airports. Everybody looks guilty in an arrivals hall. It's the lighting. When Colleen came through the doors, she was tanned the deep brown that only comes from real sun, not our watery Ontario version, and she was laughing at something on her phone, wheeling a hard-shell suitcase I didn't recognize. She kissed me on the cheek, not the mouth. The cheek, quick, the way you thank a neighbor for plowing your laneway. You look rested, I said. I feel like a whole new person, she said. And I have thought about that sentence more times than I can count. We drove north out of the airport into the dark, up the 400 past Barrie, up toward the Narrows, where our place sits on a rock point my grandfather bought for almost nothing in 1958 when nobody wanted this country except the people who already lived on it. Colleen talked the whole way. She told me about the villa in Turks and Caicos, the one Sylvia's crowd rented every fall, the infinity pool that spilled off the edge toward Grace Bay, the paddleboarding, the boat day where one of the husbands who flew down for the weekend drank too much rum and went off the back of the boat in his good shorts. She laughed telling it. I laughed along. It was easy, the two of us in the truck cab in the dark, the heater ticking, the highway peeling off behind us. I remember thinking, this is the good part of being married a long time. You don't have to perform. You can just be quiet together at 90 on the highway and it means something. I've thought about that too. We were performing. I just hadn't been handed my script yet. I should tell you about Colleen, so this makes sense. We met in Bracebridge in 1994 when I was 22 and doing my articling under an old surveyor named Pelletier who chewed toothpicks and never once said thank you. She was working the desk at the registry office. She had a way of making a boring room feel like the interesting corner of it. She was ambitious in the honest way. She'd come from nothing. From a house near Wanapate with too many kids and not enough of anything, and she wanted a life that looked like a magazine, and she was not ashamed of wanting it, and I respected that more than I ever told her. She wanted us to sell the point and build something big on Lake Joseph where the real money summers. 6,000 square feet, a boathouse with a bunkie on top, the kind of place that gets photographed. I said no, not cruelly, just no. The way you say no to a thing over and over across 26 years until the other person stops asking out loud but never really stops asking. The point was my grandfather's, then my father's, then mine. You don't sell the ground you came from so somebody can photograph you standing on somebody else's. She'd accepted it the way she accepted everything she lost an argument about with me. Loudly at first, then not at all, which should have taught me more than it did about how she handled things she couldn't change. A person who goes quiet isn't always at peace. Sometimes they've just moved the argument somewhere you can't see it. The thing I found on the Sunday. She was out. Brunch in Port Carling with Sylvia, the two of them thick as they'd been since the girls were small, before Robin even. Before any of us had the money to summer anywhere but our own dock. I was doing the thing I always do on Sundays, which is deal with the truck and the recycling and the small returns that pile up in the mudroom because I'm the one who deals with them. I've always dealt with them. 26 years I have carried the empties and sorted the blue bin and taken the rental cars back with a full tank. Nobody assigned me that. It's just mine. The way certain jobs settle onto a person in a marriage without a meeting ever being called. Her carry-on was still half-packed in the mudroom because she'd been too tired to finish it. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear, mostly because I've had to be clear with myself about it since. I was moving her bag off the bench so I could get at the ice melt bucket, and the side pocket was unzipped. and there was a small paper bag from a pharmacy in Providenciales, folded over twice the careful way you fold something you don't want opening on its own. And I want to tell you I put it back. I didn't. I opened it the way I open a wall I already suspect is rotten behind the drywall. Slow because part of me already knew, and knowing slow is easier than knowing all at once. A box of prenatal vitamins opened, a strip already gone. And under it a test 2 lines, sharp as anything. No mistaking 2 lines. I stood in my own mudroom, on a Sunday morning in October, with a lake going gray behind the window, and I ran the arithmetic, because arithmetic is the one thing I have never in my life gotten wrong when it mattered. Colleen and I hadn't been together since the middle of August. I could tell you the reason, but there isn't one worth telling, just the ordinary drift, work and tiredness, and 2 people orbiting the same kitchen without ever quite landing in the same room. Middle of August. She'd been gone the back half of September. She'd been home 9 days. There was no version of that arithmetic where the numbers came out on my side of the ledger. And I have built a whole career on not letting numbers lie to me to make me feel better. I didn't yell. I didn't sit down on the mudroom floor and put my head in my hands, though God knows the floor was right there. I took my phone out and I photographed it. The test, the box, the pharmacy receipt with the date, and the town printed on it. 3 angles each, the way I'd document a boundary marker I might need to defend in front of somebody someday. Then I folded the bag back, the way it had been folded, tucked it into the side pocket, zipped it, and set the carry-on back on the bench, exactly where she'd left it. And then I finished with the recycling. I actually finished with the recycling. I don't know what that says about me. Doug says it says I'm the calmest man he's ever seen and the coldest, and that both of those are the same thing wearing different coats. I called Doug that afternoon from the end of the dock, with my feet hanging over the cold water. My brother, 4 years younger, runs a marina down in Honey Harbor, the exact opposite of me in every way that shows on the outside. Loud where I'm quiet, wears his heart on the front of his shirt where I keep mine filed. He answered on the second ring. "You're calling me on a Sunday," he said. "Somebody die." "Not yet," I said, and I heard him stop moving. He knows my voice, brothers do. There's the thing you say and there's the thing underneath it, and Doug has always been able to hear the underneath. "Warren," he said. "What?" So I told him. All of it. In order, the trip and the pharmacy bag and the numbers, laid out plain, the way I'd walk a client through a title problem. No drama, because drama has never once fixed a thing. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. I could hear a boat lift running somewhere on his end. "You sure about the math?" he said finally. "Doug, I measure land for a living. I've never once been wrong about the math." "Okay." A breath. "Okay. Who?" "I've got an idea," I said. "I'm not going to say it out loud yet." "Why the hell not?" "Because the second I say it out loud, it's a fact I have to answer to. And I'm not answering to anything until I've walked the whole line and know exactly where the pins are." He let out a long breath that turned into something almost a laugh, the kind you make when nothing's funny. "You know most guys," he said, "would be driving to somebody's house right now." "Most guys," I said, "end up with a record and a restraining order, and the other fella still gets the girl. I'm not most guys." The name I wasn't saying was Grant. Grant Merrick. I'd met him 4 or 5 years back, through Sylvia, at some dock party on Lake Joseph, where everything cost more than it should, and everybody wanted you to notice. He was one of those men who fills a room by being loud in it. Big laugh, big watch, a handshake he'd clearly worked on. He ran Merrick Shoreline Group, put up the kind of lakeside developments that the old cottagers hate and the new money lines up to buy into. He had a partner who did the actual work while Grant did the talking. His wife was Sylvia, who was funny and warm and far, far too good for him, a thing I'd thought privately for years and never said, because you don't say that at a dock party or anywhere else. And here's the part that turned my stomach in a way the pregnancy test somehow hadn't, because I'm apparently the kind of man who can absorb a betrayal but chokes on a coincidence. For the better part of the last year, Grant Merrick had been courting me. Not socially, professionally. He had a development he wanted to put up on the far side of the Narrows. 41 lots, a marina, the whole production. And he needed 2 things from me to do it. He needed my firm, Ashford and Teal, to do the plan of subdivision, Because in this province you do not carve a lakeshore into 41 saleable pieces. Without a licensed surveyor's plan, the township can hang its approval on. And he needed a strip of my family's land, an old road allowance that ran across the corner of the point, the only sane way to get an access road into his site without blasting through a wetland the province would never let him touch. 8 months of lunches. Site walks in the rain. A very nice dinner in Toronto. He made a point of expensing in front of me. Grant Merrick had spent most of a year trying to get his hands on my survey and my land, while it was, turning out, he'd already gotten his hands on my wife. The man liked to work several deals at once. I'll give him that. If you've stumbled onto this and don't know the channel, this is Dad's final revenge. And the rule here is simple. Every person in these stories had 100 chances to just do the decent thing. And they picked the other door every single time. So pour yourself something, get comfortable, and if any of this is landing, the subscribe button keeps the lights on. Now let me tell you what I did with the next 2 weeks. I called Dr. Elaine Foss on the Monday. Elaine's an OB down in Barrie, and I know her because I did the reference plan for the clinic she bought into a few years back, and because she's the kind of person who tells you the truth in a straight line. I didn't give her Colleen's name. I gave her the shape of it. I asked her, if a woman turned up a clear positive on a home test and was already a week or more into taking prenatal vitamins, what window would she be looking at? Elaine's quiet for a second, professional, kind about it too, which almost undid me more than if she'd been clinical. Warren, she said, I can't diagnose a woman I've never seen, but a person doesn't start on prenatals casually. If she's already on them and testing clean positive, she's past the guessing stage. She knows. Somebody probably confirmed it for her. A pause. This isn't a hypothetical, is it? No, I said. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be, I told her. I'm still just walking the line. I don't do anything till I've seen the whole line. That, Elaine said gently, is a very you way to survive a thing like this. I didn't ask her to narrow it to a date. I want you to notice that, because a lot of men in my position would have. I didn't need a date. I needed a fact, and the fact was that somewhere in a rented villa above Grace Bay, my wife had gotten pregnant, and she had come home to me and let me carry her suitcase and cook her eggs and be glad she was back. The exact day didn't matter. You don't need to survey the whole lot to know the house isn't yours anymore. I want to tell you I held it together clean through all of this, but that would be a lie, and I've done enough lying to myself lately. On the Tuesday, I drove out to a job near Rosso, a boundary retracement on some cottage lots, ordinary work, the kind I can do in my sleep, and I got the total station set up over the marker and put my eye to it, and I could not make my hands hold steady enough to sight the rod. My own hands. 30 years. I've been reading fractions of a second of arc off an instrument, and I stood in the cedars with the lake flat as glass, and I could not hold the line. And then it came up all at once, the way frost heave cracks a foundation in one bad winter. And I sat down, in the moss with my back against a white pine, and I cried the way I have not cried since my father went, ugly and without any dignity at all, alone in the bush where nobody could see it. 26 years, Robin's whole childhood, every Christmas, every canoe trip, every long ordinary Tuesday. I let all of it out into the moss, and then I wiped my face with the back of my glove, and I stood up, and I sighted the rod, and my hands were steady again. I finished the job. I've thought a lot about whether that makes me strong or makes me broken. I think it just makes me the only kind of man I ever learned how to be. Robin called that night. My daughter, 26, down in Toronto doing something in marketing I've never fully understood. She calls Sundays usually, so a Tuesday call put a little spike of fear in me before I even answered, the way any change in the pattern does when you already know something's coming down. Hey Dad, she said. Mom sounds weird. Is everything okay up there? And I want you to understand something. I sat on my own dock with my daughter's voice in my ear, and every single thing I knew balanced on the tip of my tongue, and I swallowed all of it. Because it wasn't mine to hand her over the phone on a Tuesday. Because a kid should not learn a thing like that from the parent who's about to blow up the house. We're fine, kiddo, I said. Your mom's just tired from the trip. You know how she gets. And Robin said okay, and told me about her week, and I listened to every word like it was the last easy conversation we'd have, because I had a feeling it was. That was the hardest lie I told in the whole thing. Not the ones I told Colleen. The one I told Robin to keep her Tuesday intact for one more week. Curtis Teal is my business partner, 20 years now, and my friend for longer. I told him on the Wednesday, after our surveyor and the summer student had gone home, and it was just the two of us in the office over the hardware store on the main drag with the light going out of the sky. I laid it out flat, same as I'd told Doug. The trip, the test, the math, Grant Merrick. Curtis sat there and didn't say a word for what felt like a full minute. And Curtis Teal is a man who has an opinion about the weather. Grant Merrick, he said finally. Grant Merrick, the Grant Merrick, he said, whose plan of subdivision is sitting on my desk right now waiting for us to seal it, whose access easement across your grandfather's point we're supposed to sign off on Friday. That'd be the one. Curtis leaned back in his chair. Slow, the chair complained. He turned his pencil end over end in his fingers, a thing he's done since college when he's rearranging the furniture in his head. Warren, he said, tell me you're thinking what I'm thinking. I've been thinking it since Sunday, I said. We haven't sealed anything. No, we have not. That easement's not signed. It is not. And a firm has an obligation, Curtis said carefully, tasting each word, to be thorough, to do its due diligence before it attaches its license to a plan that's going to sit in the registry for 100 years. It would be professionally irresponsible. I agreed. To rush it. How long do you need to be thorough? 2 weeks, I said. Give me 2 weeks. He set the pencil down. I'll tell Grant we've hit a title question on the road allowance, he said. Which is even true. There's always a title question on a road allowance if you look hard enough. There's always something, I said. If you look. Margaret Vane has practiced family law in Barrie for 31 years, and there is not one motivational poster on her office walls, which is the reason I trusted her the first time I met her and every time since. I came in Thursday morning with a folder. She poured me a coffee I didn't drink and put on her reading glasses and went through what I'd brought. The test proves a pregnancy, she said. The timeline supports your theory. That's it. That's circumstantial, Warren, and you should hear me say that out loud. I'm not taking this to a courtroom, Margaret. I'm taking it to a kitchen table. She looked at me over the glasses. Explain. So I told her about Grant, the subdivision, the easement, the 8 months of lunches, the term sheet, the man courting my capital and my land while he was courting my wife. Margaret set her pen down when I got to that part, and Margaret Vane does not set her pen down for much. So he spent the better part of a year, she said, trying to get your professional seal and a piece of your family's property. While getting my wife pregnant in a rented villa, yes, busy man. Something moved at the corner of her mouth that was almost a smile, and for Margaret that's a standing ovation. What do you want out of this? And here's where the 2 weeks had gotten me. I looked out her window at the traffic on Dunlop Street, an ordinary Thursday in an ordinary town, and I said, I want Colleen taken care of, and I want her clear-eyed about what she did. I don't want her destroyed. I want her to have what she came into this with, and not 1 square foot of what came down to me from my family. And I want Grant Merrick to understand, in language he cannot possibly misread, exactly whose point of land he thought he was going to drive a road across. Margaret was quiet a moment, then she pulled a file. The domestic contract, she said, the one you had her sign in '96. I remember, you had better remember, because it's the best thing you ever did and you did it before you had the sense to know why. She read from it. When Colleen and I married, my father was still alive, an old country stubborn about the point, and he wouldn't bless the marriage until she'd signed a contract that walked the family land and the house on it out of any future claim. Excluded property, hers waived in writing, witnessed, independent legal advice on both sides, clean as a survey pin. At the time it had felt like a cruel thing an old man was making me do. Colleen had cried. I'd nearly torn it up, I hadn't. This holds, Margaret said. It's 26 years old, and it's airtight, and it means the point and the house are yours, and we're always going to be yours. She leaves with her own RRSP, her own accounts, her personal property, and the equalization on what the two of you built together off the land, which is real money and fair money. But the ground you came from stays yours. She took her glasses off. In 31 years, I've watched 100 good men hand over the family farm, because they felt too guilty to fight for it. You're not going to be one of them, and it's got nothing to do with revenge. It's got to do with the fact that she signed her name. I know she did, I said. Then we file, Margaret said. Say the word. Colleen got comfortable that second week, or careless, and I've never been sure those two things aren't the same animal. She started taking her calls out on the screen porch, with the door shut. 10 minutes at a stretch, her voice pitched low under the sound of the wind in the birches. I didn't stand at the door. I didn't have to. The pattern was its own confession. Over supper one night she said, light as anything, sliding a plate in front of me. Grant and Sylvia might come up Saturday, for dinner. That okay? I looked up. Sure, I said. Love to have them. She searched my face for something. She'd always been able to read the things I didn't say. It's most of why our marriage worked as long as it did. But I'd stopped leaving anything out for her to find. You sure? She said. I know you and Grant aren't exactly. It's fine, I said, and I smiled, and I meant the smile, which was its own kind of terrible. Invite them. It'll be good. She smiled back, relieved, and I watched her mistake my patience for peace, and I thought, that's the last thing you're going to get wrong in this marriage. And it's a big one. On the Friday I called Sylvia. Before you decide what that makes me, hear me out, because it's the part I'm least ashamed of. Sylvia was innocent. In a story full of people who chose wrong, Sylvia Merrick had not chosen anything. She'd spent 9 days in that villa, believing her husband was in Toronto, closing deals. And her best friend was just her best friend. And she deserved to know before the whole thing came down on her from the 6 o'clock direction. But I wasn't going to be the one who told her, not directly, not over the phone, because a thing like that landing from the wronged husband turns into a mess about him instead of a truth about them. So I did it the careful way. Curtis had a fellow he'd used before, quiet, good with the digital end of things, and there was a thread, messages, a couple of them regrettably specific, that traced back cleanly to an account that was Grant's, and only Grant's. I had it put in a plain envelope. It went to Sylvia's sister in Gravenhurst, a woman with a spine, with a note that said only, your sister should see this. From a friend who thinks she deserves the truth on her own schedule and not anyone else's. To be open Saturday morning. Not before. Some things need to arrive in the right order or they don't work at all. Saturday I got up before the light. Colleen was asleep. Her phone face down on the nightstand, with the screen dimmed all the way down, that deliberate kind of dark. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom in the house I'd kept in the family that she'd wanted me to sell, and I looked at my wife of 26 years sleeping, and what I felt was not anger. I keep telling people that and they keep not believing it. It was grief. Flat, wide, quiet grief, the kind that doesn't want to break anything because breaking things is for people who still think something can be fixed. Anger looks forward. Grief just stands in the doorway and looks at what was. Then I went and I did the work. She was out most of the day, errands, the hairdresser, getting ready for a dinner that was never going to happen. And while she was gone, I packed her life into boxes. Not thrown, not torn, not a single thing broken. Packed, every item that was hers. Her clothes, her books, the whole shelf of records she'd built up over the years, the framed photographs, the good dishes her mother left her, the paddleboard she used twice, the unopened bottle of hot sauce she'd hauled home from Providenciales, like a trophy from a country she'd wrecked our marriage in. 19 boxes. I counted them, because I count things. Each one labeled in block letters, by room, the way I'd label evidence I might have to stand behind. Kitchen, bedroom, study. The ones I wasn't sure about I marked misc and defaulted to hers, because when you're not certain whose a thing is, you give it to the person who's leaving. I stacked them along the front hall, squared up, corners aligned, a life returned to its owner in good order. If you're still here, do me the one small thing that keeps a channel like this going. Hit subscribe. Most people never do. It costs you nothing, and it means everything on this end. Now let me tell you about the door. She came home a little after 4. October light going gold and low over the water. The maples up the ridge gone the color they only get for about a week before the wind takes them. She had a bottle of wine in one hand for the dinner. She got 3 steps into the front hall and she stopped. Warren, she said. Very small. I was at the kitchen table. The table I built myself out of a hemlock beam we pulled from my grandfather's collapsed ice house. The table Robin learned to draw at. The table we'd eaten 26 years of ordinary suppers across. My jacket was on. My hands were flat on the wood. "Hi, Colleen." Shut the door, you're letting the heat out." She shut it. Slow, buying time. She looked at the boxes, then at me, then at the boxes. "What is this?" she said, and her voice wasn't steady the way she wanted it to be. "I helped you pack," I said. "I labeled everything by room. The ones in the hall marked MISC. I wasn't sure whose they were, so I gave them to you. You can sort it out whenever, Warren." My name came apart in the middle. "What are you doing?" "Being organized," I said. "You always said I was too organized. Funny how it comes in handy." She crossed the room and set the wine down on the counter too carefully, the way you set down something when your hands aren't sure of themselves. And she stood in front of me. And I watched her face do the work of a woman realizing she had badly misjudged the size of the thing she was standing in. "Can you please just talk to me?" she said. "Please. Whatever you think you, Colin." I said it gently, because there was no reason left not to. "Sit down." She sat, across from me, at our table, her hands in her lap like a kid in the principal's office. And I laid 3 things down on the hemlock between us, one at a time, unhurried. The first was the photograph, the test, the box of prenatals, the pharmacy receipt with Providencialis printed right on it, all of it on a plain sheet of paper. She looked at it, and her whole face changed in a way I won't describe, because some things stay private even at the end, even between 2 people burning the house down. The second was a document from Margaret's office, a divorce application, already filed. Thursday morning, 2 days ago while she was getting her hair done, her eyes went to it and came back to me. The third was a single printed page. 2 messages, time-stamped, from a villa's Wi-Fi in Turks and Caicos to an account that a careful man had traced, patiently to Grant Merrick and nobody else. I'd read it once. Once was plenty. There are measurements you only take one time. The kitchen was dead quiet. Outside the wind came up off the narrows and moved through the birches, that sound like the lake breathing. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Since the Sunday," I said. "You left the pharmacy bag in the mudroom. I found it moving your suitcase off the bench. I let that sit a second. I've always moved the suitcase, Colleen." She closed her eyes. "Warren, I am so," I said. "Not sharp, just done. That's not the part that matters. The part that matters is that being sorry and facing the consequences aren't the same thing, and you have known that about me for 26 years. It's practically the only thing about me you ever really understood." "Where am I supposed to go?" she said. It wasn't defiant. It was the flat, lost question of somebody standing in a building that's already coming down, looking for a door. "Sylvia's," I said, and I watched it land. It arrived in stages, the way understanding does when it's this big. First confusion. Then something sharpening behind her eyes. Then the whole weight of it coming down on her at once. "What did you do?" she breathed. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I'm a surveyor, Colleen. I don't act early. I walk the entire line first and I find every pin before I so much as move a stake." I turned my phone face up on the table so she could see the screen. A text from Doug, come in while she was on the road. "She knows." Sylvia's sister called. "Warren, she knows all of it." Colleen read it. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "How?" "Somebody thought Sylvia deserved to find out on her own from her own people, and not from you or me," I said. I stood up, smoothed the front of my jacket, the way you're supposed to, the way my father did. "Grant's having a very specific Saturday up." "Warren," she started, and stopped. "Grant," I said, pleasant as anything, "is finding out this afternoon that Ashford and Teal has withdrawn from his plan of subdivision, citing an undisclosed conflict of personal interest, and that the access easement across my grandfather's point, the one his entire 41-lot development lives or dies on, the one there's no legal way around without a road through a provincially significant wetland, is not going to be granted. Not this year, not any year I'm alive to say no to it." She sat very still. "The withdrawal letter went to his co-investors too," I said, "copied as a professional courtesy. Standard practice." I picked my keys up off the counter. "When the lead survey walks and the land walks with it, the money gets nervous. It's not personal, Colleen. It's just how the ground works. You can't build 41 lakefront lots on a piece of land you can't legally reach. Everybody's going to want to reopen everything. In this market, I'd say Grant's looking at a year, minimum, if it lives at all, and I don't think it lives at all. You did all this to hurt me, she said, and for the first time there was something other than sorrow in it. No, I said, and I meant it, and I needed her to hear that I meant it. I did it because Grant Merrick sat across a table from me for the better part of a year trying to get his hands on my seal and my family's land, and the whole time he already had his hands on you. A man like that should understand exactly whose point he was standing on when he decided the rules didn't apply to him. That's not about you. That part was never about you. I picked up the overnight bag I'd packed 3 days earlier and set by the door. Doug's spare room at the marina was 90 minutes south. Colleen sat at the hemlock table in the last of the gold light, surrounded by the squared-off boxes of a life that was over, and she looked, for 1 second, exactly like the girl at the registry desk in 1994 who made a boring room interesting, and then she didn't anymore. The house is yours to stay in through the settlement, I said. Margaret will be in touch this week. You'll be taken care of, Colleen. You'll have what you came in with and a fair share of what we built, and you'll be fine. I made sure of that. But the point stays mine. You signed that in '96. I know it cost you to sign it. It's going to cost you again now, and I'm sorry about that, but sorry doesn't move a single pin. Warren, she said. My name, small like a word she was learning to say in a language where it meant something else now. I loved our life. I know you did, I said. So did I. That's the whole tragedy of it. You had a life a lot of people would have traded their teeth for, and it wasn't big enough to be photographed, so you went and found out what it was worth by giving it away in a rented villa. I hope the answer was good, Colleen. I truly do, because it cost you everything, and you don't get to pretend it didn't. I opened the door. The canyon of cold October air came off the lake and into the house, clean, smelling of granite and cedar, and the first hard frost coming. I didn't wait for an answer. You don't stand around admiring a job once the last stake's in the ground. I walked out to my truck, backed it down the laneway my grandfather cut in 1958, and drove south along the Narrows with the window cracked and the maples burning red on the ridge above the water. I didn't look back at the house. I never look back at a finished job. Everything I needed to know about it, I already knew. 3 weeks later, Curtis told me Grant Merrick had called our office 6 times, and that each time, unfortunately, I'd been out in the field. 7 weeks later, Sylvia filed. Her lawyer, by a coincidence I had nothing whatsoever to do with, was Margaret Vane. 10 weeks after that, Grant's development came apart entirely, and not because of me, his remaining partner, doing the due diligence I'd forced everybody into by walking, turned up a mess of pre-sold lots, and moved deposits that had nothing to do with my wife, and everything to do with Grant, being the kind of man who cut corners on paper the same lazy way he cut them on people. I never made one call about that. Some structures come down on their own schedule once you stop being the thing holding them up. Robin took it hard, and I let her, because she was owed her anger, and her grief, and her long, ugly phone calls, and some of it landed on me, which was fair. She's talking to her mother again now. I'm glad of that. A kid shouldn't have to choose, and I've told her so. She calls me Sundays again, and once in a while a Tuesday, and I've stopped flinching at the Tuesdays. I've started a new place. Small. On the point, tucked into the trees a little further back from the water than the old house. East-facing, so the morning light comes across the lake and into the kitchen before it reaches anywhere else. 1 bedroom. My drafting table by the east window. A hemlock table I haven't built yet, but can already see. I drew it the way I draw everything. From the ground up, from a benchmark I set myself, with the intention that it stands longer than I do. I still have the photograph from that Sunday in the mudroom, folded once, tucked in the back of the binder behind the drawings for the new place. Not as a wound, not as a trophy either. Just as a mark. The exact spot where I stopped defending something that had already washed out from under me, and set a fresh pin, and started laying out ground I could actually stand on. You can't build anything true until you know exactly where the ground is. For a long time I thought I did. Now I actually do.